During your time in the military, you also became what was called a cyber warrior. What does that entail?
At that time, I had finished out with my master's degree, and I had wrapped up a command in Pottstown in Pennsylvania, and I was commander of the Alpha unit there, which is the logistics unit. That was a good experience, but I said, if I'm going to continue doing things in the military, maybe I can find a connection with where my interests are and what might be the future of warfare. So that was in about 2000. 2001, we had September 11th, and I had been knocking on the door in the Pentagon asking, hey, what's going to happen with cyber? Are we going to be thinking about this? I had applied for the White House Fellowship. I didn't get it, but you have to write a letter to the president as part of your application. And if you actually get accepted, you will brief the president on your letter, on your memorandum, on your suggestion. What would you like to see changed? And my memo was, we need to stand up another domain of warfare around space and around cyber. And today, those are both 4-star billets, meaning that those are now commanded by 4-star generals. Back then, it was a bunch of captains and lieutenants who were working in industry in the reserves who were raising our hands saying, hey, we think that this, with our civilian skills, we see a future here for defending our assets and for potentially attacking our adversaries' assets. And we needed an infrastructure and a way to do that. So it was a very entrepreneurial experience in the Pentagon, which those two words don't normally come together very often, of knocking on doors and finding out what was happening. And not a lot was happening. And so they took positions that were unfilled in all of the services and just said, hey, these positions haven't been filled. We're going to give those slots randomly across the military to you and just start recruiting. And eventually we're going to call it, and usually in the Army you hear about a company or a battalion. They call this thing an element. They didn't know what to call it. And they put us together, and eventually it became a real unit with a real flag, which is interesting. That comes out from the Heritage Department of the Pentagon. But in the beginning, it was just a concerned group of captains and majors and lieutenant colonels that saw a future of what cyber warfare was going to be and started taking actions to begin to prepare. I think I'd always been interested in innovation. And I was a tinkerer, if you will, and would take things apart or find friends that had computers. We didn't have any computers growing up, really. My dad bought an Apple IIc, I think, and I learned how to, use Microsoft DOS on it. But I didn't really have an affinity for it. I'm not a very good coder. But one of the things that I learned was that innovation was an area where I like to apply innovation. And so if I have a professional mantra, that's it, right? I've been able to boil down what really motivates me into 2 words: applying innovation. And that came early. I knew probably within about 5 years of my time in the military that I wanted to find places where there were new inventions. I didn't feel like I needed to invent anything, but I wanted to take these inventions that other people were coming up with and find ways to use them. And I've done that in different places. One of the first things that I got to experience in the military was there was a warehouse at Fort Lewis in Seattle. There was this Captains with Industry program. And what they would do from the Pentagon is they would pick maybe 5 or 10 captains in somewhere in the Army, and they would dispatch them to go work at places like Walmart for a year. And then the next year, that captain had to come back to the Department of Defense and implement whatever it was that they learned at wherever it was that they were working. And at my warehouse was chosen to implement 4 really neat innovations. One was a server-based logistical program. Another were credit cards that basically had all of the parts that came in. So it wasn't really a credit card. It was just all the parts on the chip. And they saved us so much time. We had infrared sensors on our walls that when we located a bin on these little devices that you see at Walmart, We were the first Department of the Army location to implement that. And so in the Army, with the incredible budgets that we have, I was able to be around innovations, be a part of it. And eventually it just felt right. And it's what I knew that I wanted to do.